read the Expropriation Act and I'm here to set the record straight, because what's happening is dangerous. The whole world is talking about South Africa and people are confused. They're sharing information about things they don't really understand and it's scaring them. And very quickly the conversation is going in a direction that we can't afford and don't want. We don't want another race war. My name is Catherine White. I'm a journalist and I'm here to make complex South African news stories more consumable than ever before. South Africa has a modern, advanced, and brilliant constitution, often claimed the best in the world. Do you really think that the government of South Africa has passed a law that is going to take away or steal the property of white Afrikaners to the extent that they have to apply for refugee status in the United States? No. And I can tell you this because I've read the act. The law is simple and straightforward. Nobody is coming to steal your home. People are confusing issues. Kali Kriel wants President Ramaphosa to acknowledge and look into farm murders. Mr. Musk, please do not confuse issues. You are causing panic. I'm speaking on the act. But even AfriForum said no thank you to the offer of refugee status by President Trump. The act is long, bear with me. These are the key points. I'm also not talking about the 1975 Act, the one from 50 years ago. The key aspects are that it has to be in the public interest and for public good. Expropriation can only happen for reasons that serve the public, such as building roads, schools, or for land redistribution. If you're a citrus farmer and you're using the land, nobody is going to expropriate it. We're talking about land that's not being used. The second point, compensation. Owners must receive just and equitable compensation, considering factors beyond just market value. Procedure. The government must follow a clear process. Notice. Property owners must be notified in advance. Negotiation. Attempts should be made to agree on compensation before compulsory expropriation. Court involvement. Disputes over fairness or compensation can be resolved through the courts. Now let's talk about expropriation without compensation. The Act aligns with Section 25 of the Constitution, which allows for expropriation without compensation in limited circumstances, such as abandoned land and state-owned property. So no, simply being white and owning a house in South Africa does not mean your property can be taken away. The Expropriation Act and Section 25 of the Constitution protect property rights, ensuring that expropriation can only happen under specific conditions. So here's what you need to know. Number one, expropriation must serve a public interest or purpose. So the government cannot take property arbitrarily. Expropriation is only allowed for reasons that benefit the public, such as infrastructure projects, land reform, or addressing historical injustice. Number two, just and equitable compensation. If your property is expropriated, you're entitled to just and fair compensation, considering market value, investment, and history of acquisition. In rare cases, expropriation without compensation may apply, but in limited circumstances. For example, abandoned land, land held for speculation, or state-owned property, or land already owned by the state. Number three, the legal process and rights. You must be notified if expropriation is planned. You can challenge expropriation in court if it's unfair or unjust. Race is not a factor in determining whose land or property can be expropriated. So, should you be worried? If you legally own your house and you're using it, it's highly unlikely that it's going to be expropriated without compensation. The process is governed by law and the Constitution, which means there are protections against unfair expropriation. So the government has outlined specific categories of property that are more likely to be expropriated, particularly under land reform and public interest objectives. Here's what kind of property is most at risk. Abandoned and neglected land. Land held for speculation. State-owned land not in use. Land with historical injustice claims. Underutilized or underproductive agricultural land. What is unlikely to be expropriated? Private residential homes in cities and suburbs. Businesses and commercial properties that are actively operating. Farms that are actively producing food and creating jobs. While the government has legal power to expropriate, it must follow due process and offer fair compensation, unless special circumstances justify expropriation without compensation. If you made it this far, Thank you, and send this to a friend who needs to know what's happening.